Deep within the heart of the Whispering Woods lived a tiny ant named Anthony. He was known throughout the forest for his bravery, always being the first to help anyone in need. But what Anthony lacked in size, he made up for in determination and quick thinking. One day, while Anthony was busy tending to his anthill, he heard an urgent message from one of his fellow ants. "Anthony, come quickly. We have a big problem," she cried. "What's happened?" asked Anthony, rushing to her side. "The river has overflowed and it's washing away our food stores," she explained, her voice filled with panic. "We have to do something fast before everything is lost," said Anthony, his face set with determination. As he looked out over the raging waters, he knew exactly what he had to do. Calling for all the able-bodied ants, he set them to work building a wall of pebbles and twigs to stem the flow of water. But despite their best efforts, the current was just too strong and the tiny anthill was starting to get washed away. Just when all hope seemed lost, a wise old turtle named Sheldon emerged from the water. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked kindly. Seeing the desperate ants, Sheldon wasted no time. Using his sturdy shell, he helped the ants move their food stores to higher ground, saving them from certain destruction. "Thank you, Sheldon," said Anthony, bowing his head in gratitude. "You've saved our home and our colony." But Sheldon only smiled and said, "It was my pleasure, little ant. But remember, true strength comes not from size or power, but from working together." With the threat of the rising river now gone, the ants returned to their daily tasks, feeling grateful for Sheldon's help. However, Anthony couldn't shake off a feeling that something wasn't right. The sky was ominously dark, and a heavy silence had fallen over the Whispering Woods. Suddenly, a huge clap of thunder boomed overhead, startling Anthony. Looking up, he saw dark clouds gathering, forming a giant funnel that reached down towards the earth. An enormous storm was on its way. As the wind began to pick up, Anthony knew he had to warn the others. Racing back to the anthill, he shouted, "Everyone, we're not safe here. We have to leave before it's too late." But some of the younger ants were too scared to leave their homes. "I don't want to go," they cried. "What if the storm hurts us?" Anthony understood their fear, but he also knew that staying in the anthill would be dangerous. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. "We have to go to the willow tree for shelter. It's the only tall structure around that can protect us." But as the ants started to make their way to the willow tree, the wind grew stronger, making it difficult for them to move forward. Some of the weaker ants began to struggle, and Anthony's heart went out to them. Stopping to help those in need, he continued to lead the colony away from the danger of the storm. Meanwhile, the sky above grew darker and the wind became a raging torrent. Suddenly, a large leaf was torn from the willow tree and swept towards the ants. It was hurtling towards them at a terrifying speed, and there was nowhere for them to hide. Just when all hope seemed lost, Anthony sprang into action. Leaping in front of the leaf, he used his tiny legs to push it away from the other ants, shielding them with his own body. But as he pushed, the leaf caught the edge of an ant cutter, and before he knew it, Anthony was being swept up into the air. As the leaf tumbled through the sky, Anthony held on for dear life, determined to survive. But as he looked down, he saw that the rest of the ants had disappeared from view. Lost and alone, Anthony felt a surge of sadness. Had he made a mistake? Would he ever see his colony again? But then he remembered the words of the wise old turtle. True strength comes not from size or power, but from working together. Taking a deep breath, Anthony closed his eyes and focused on the task at hand. He needed to find a way to save himself and bring the colony back together. Then he remembered something. The storm was still raging outside, but underneath the leaf, it was relatively calm. Carefully opening one eye, Anthony peeked outside. The wind was still strong, but the leaf was starting to slow down. With a surge of adrenaline, Anthony started to steer the leaf towards the nearest tree, using every ounce of strength he had. Slowly but surely, he guided it towards safety. And just when he thought he couldn't go on any longer, he saw a familiar sight in the distance. It was a willow tree, and under its sheltering branches were the rest of his colony. With a final burst of energy, Anthony steered the leaf towards the tree, and in a moment, they were safe. As the other ants looked up and saw Anthony, their faces lit up with joy. "You're alive!" they cried, rushing to greet him. "I thought I'd lost you in the storm." Anthony smiled, knowing that they had all been through a terrifying ordeal together. But he was also proud of himself for not giving up. He had used his courage, determination and quick thinking to save himself and bring the colony back together. As the storm raged on outside, the ants huddled together for warmth and comfort. They shared stories and jokes to lift each other's spirits and remind themselves that they were not alone. And as the night wore on, they gradually drifted off to sleep, feeling safe and secure in their shelter. When the first rays of sunlight peeked through the clouds the next morning, Anthony woke up feeling refreshed and renewed. He looked around and saw that the storm had passed and the sky was clear once more. The ants, shaken but unharmed, began to emerge from their shelter. They looked around in amazement at the damage the storm had caused. Trees were uprooted, leaves were scattered everywhere, and the river had overflowed once again. But despite the destruction, the ants were overjoyed to see that their colony had survived. And as they started to clean up the mess, they couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had faced a terrible storm together and they had come out stronger on the other side. From that day on, the ants of the Whispering Woods were known throughout the jungle for their bravery and resilience. They never forgot the lessons they had learned from the storm, and they always remembered the words of the wise old turtle. True strength comes not from size or power, but from working together. And Anthony, the tiny ant who had saved his colony, became a hero of the jungle. As the sun set over the Whispering Woods, the animals gathered together for their nightly campfire. The wise old turtle sat in the center, listening as the animals shared their adventures of the day. When it was Anthony's turn to speak, he told the animals about his colony's narrow escape from the storm and how they had come together to save themselves. The animals listened intently, and when Anthony finished his story, there was a moment of silence. Finally, the wise old turtle spoke. "Little ant," he said, "you have shown great bravery and determination. You are truly a hero of the jungle." The other animals nodded in agreement, and Anthony blushed at the praise. But the wise old turtle continued, "But remember, Anthony, your greatest strength is not your size or your courage, but your willingness to help others. You put the needs of your colony before your own safety, and that is the quality that all the animals in the jungle admire. Anthony felt a warm glow inside as he listened to the turtle's words. He had never thought of himself as a hero, and he was surprised by the praise he was receiving. But as he looked around at the smiling faces of the other animals, he knew that they were right. Helping others was what made him feel good about himself, and he was happy to know that the other animals admired him for it. From that day on, Anthony continued to help anyone in need, and he became known throughout the jungle as the kindest, most generous ant of them all. And although he was just a tiny ant, he knew that he could make a big difference in the world. And that's the end of our story for today.